welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know everybody's busy and a lot of people have traveled very far from a variety of different places to attend tonight's panel. On behalf of all of us, low battery.
The government executive phone way early.
Just use your big voice.
I don't know what about.
I'll try and project until we can figure out the battery thing. On behalf of everybody who organized everything, thank you guys for coming. Welcome to TRU, which is in the heart of unceded Secwepemc, specifically this campus in the traditional domain of the Tecumseh to Secwepemc. Thank you guys. My name is Tristan. This is my esteemed comrade, filling with the microphone there. And we are two graduate students in TRU's Masters of Human Rights and Social Justice program. As many of you know, last year's wildfire season was disastrous, especially for the residents of the interior, the Okanagan, but as well as the North Shuswap, the communities of Lee Creek, Scotch Creek, Solista, Adams Lake, Squilax to Secwepemc, all the way down to Sorrento. This event is to provide context for what happened, both from a policy and protocol perspective, but it's also to help everybody make sense of it so that it will never happen again. So thank you guys all for coming. We have four likewise esteemed panelists tonight. I'll begin tonight by introducing everyone. First, we have Jay Simpson. I'll just introduce everybody first, if you don't mind. First, we have Jay Simpson, CSRD Electoral Area F Director. We have Carl Bishop, the fifth of 7 generations on the Shuswap. His family's legacy there goes back to 1895. He's also a rancher and logger there. And we also have, where's Alan? Oh, Alan over there. We also have Alan Wilcox, retired now, sort of, but Director of Forestry for Northwest Ontario. He has worked likewise in both BC and Saskatchewan and has advised premiers on forestry and wildfire response policy, protocol, etc. We're very lucky to have him here all the way from Kelowna. I'll give it over to Kevin here to introduce our, so we may not have batteries.
We may not have batteries. Double A. It goes on for half a second.
1 or 2.
A tragedy, really.
I mean,
Dwayne, you must have batteries.
It ran for a couple minutes before.
So let's test this again, see how long it goes for. But all right, well, I've got the microphone now.
So now I don't.
Your battery's coming short.
So I'll just start by saying, when you look around and see the devastation already resulting from a changing climate, you often might wonder who was acting effectively during those pivotal years, challenging the system in a way that would have had an effect on this outcome. A better world is always worth fighting for, and were it not for the action taken by Jim Cooperman and the Shuswap Environmental Action Society, this region would surely be in a much worse state of affairs. Long before the forest burned every year, and we came to expect months indoors or choking on smoke, these people were actively saving old growth and challenging industry before many of the parks we can visit nearby and often take for granted, such as Anstey, Hanakwa, and Momich Lake Provincial Parks were, in fact, provincial parks. The work of Cooperman and the SEAS no doubt had a significant impact on their creation. The book Big Trees Saved begins in 1989 on the first page, and I quote, "It was toxic smoke of another kind that stirred Jim Cooperman to action in the Shuswap region of BC. The poisonous drift from the local landfill dump would regularly engulf his log home at Lee Creek, and one day he'd had enough. He'd been an anti-war activist back in Berkeley, and knew it was time to take action on the environmental front. So Jim's been an author of 2 books. We have Shuswap Country and Everything Shuswap. And in recent times has taken up the fight of our burning forests and what it means for citizens in BC. So without further ado, I'll call Jim up here.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tristan. And thank you, Derek Cook. And thank you, Thompson Rivers University. And thank all of you for coming tonight. Okay, it's been a very traumatic year last year. It was nasty. And we certainly don't want to see another year like last year. And in order to try to prevent another year like last year, we have been promoting change to how fires are fought. And so my presentation tonight will take us back to the fire that swept through our community and why that happened. And then it'll move forward and talk about the policies that created the damage. So we hope what happened last year is going to be the last time. That's why we're calling it the last straw. We're fed up in the North Shuswap, and we want to take our complaints, and we have been taking our complaints throughout the whole province. Well, to begin with, climate change is a burning issue. We all know the CO2 levels are rising, and everything is rising along with them. The temperatures, and unfortunately, the number of hectares burnt. But we can't just blame climate change or climate chaos, as I like to refer to it now, as the reason for last summer's devastation. Now, of course, given the ongoing drought, this summer could be far worse. So what are the impacts of a wildfire? Massive amounts of carbon in the atmosphere. Last year in BC, it was 102 megatons, and that's versus the 62 megatons from all other sources. And governments don't include that. They don't count the number of, the amount of carbon going in the atmosphere from wildfires. And then, of course, once those trees are burnt, we've lost those trees. They're no longer sinking the carbon. They're no longer sucking up the carbon. And then the soot from the smoke increases the glacier melt. And then the dead trees continue to emit carbon for many decades. And then we all know about the health concerns from smoke. Then there's all the economic impacts. The insurance alone from last year's Shuswap Okanagan fires was more than ever before, $720 million. And that's just the insurance. There's all the other costs that it's difficult to tabulate them all. There's loss of infrastructure, lost tourism, lost jobs, businesses destroyed, plantations in young forests gone, emergency evacuation expenses, restoration costs, agricultural impacts. The list just goes on. And then we've got ecosystem damage, wildlife impacts. We've lost our parks, damaged watersheds, damage to the hydrological cycle, and then erosion that we have to look forward to. And of course, adding to all that is the loss of homes, structures, and increased stress for everyone. The Shuswap's worst disaster, that's what we had last year. 251 structures destroyed, 59 damaged, nearly 80% of Chukchwek Provincial Park lost, over 45,000 hectares of forest burnt. And you know what? It was preventable. This is where we live. Our home, we built it. I've lived there for 55 years at Lee Creek. And this is what it looked like the night of the firestorm. Thankfully, when I returned 12 hours later, it was still standing, and only because of all the fire smart work that we did. We made sure there aren't any trees near our house. Anything conifer was gone, junipers, and we watered behind the house a few days before the fire. So since the fire, I've been working hard, as Kevin mentioned, to get the message out. And that includes editorials in the Globe and Mail, in the Victoria Times Colonist, headline news in the Vancouver Sun, in the Vancouver Province, in papers throughout the whole country. The first step was a petition with 6 complaints that went to the BC Ombudsman, the Forest Practices Board, the BC Auditor General, and the Wildfire Task Force. And they include the inadequate response to the initial fires, the massive aerial ignition of a 10-kilometer-long attempted controlled burn on August 17th, prior to a significant windstorm. And this was a case of gross negligence, and it resulted in a firestorm that devastated the North Shuswap community. The lack of adequate warnings to the North Shuswap residents about the danger from the rapidly approaching fire, and the need for many to evacuate by boat over a long logging road to Seymour Arm and Malacca and put residents' lives at risk. Some people had 5 minutes to leave their homes. Government's enforcement of the evacuation order was inappropriate and counterproductive. The rigid adherence to enforcement did not recognize the skills, capacity, and efforts of the many residents who remained to fight the fires after all the BC Wildfire Service left. This caused great stress and denied residents basic human rights. These residents saved countless homes and properties, yet they were blocked from receiving supplies and could not drive on the roads where roadblocks were staffed by police in spike belts. Then on the morning of August 18th, the BC Wildfire Service knew what was happening and they did nothing. No water bombers were called up. They just all were shaking in their boots. And then what did BC Wildfire Service do? More misinformation, more lies. So it all began with an initial attack failure. Lightning strike, and there's a picture of it that just after it happened. And on the left side, that's what they should have done. They should have launched the big planes and dumped tons of water on it, and those fires would have been just about out. But you know what? They never launched those. The planes never left the tarmac, and maybe might not have even been any planes. So that was on July 12th. And then nearly a month later, after BC Wildfire Service made countless mistakes, did not take the offer of contractors who offered to get in there with their equipment and put those fires out early in the days when they were small. And the fire almost burned up the homes at Adams Lake. So the fire was at that point approaching our community. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's the glob, that orange glob, that's where the fire was on August 17th. And here's Lee Creek. And so what did they decide to do just before a major windstorm was light a backburn, and that's that blue area. That was their plan, to get rid of all the fuel, the forest, in between the fire and the rest of the community. 2,600 hectares. So this is what it looked like from our property, from down at the lake. It was massive. And that's it. They lit it at 3:15. So by 5:30, look how large it was. By 6:35, the wind started blowing to the east. And just after they lit it, I received an email from the head forester at Canoe Forest Products. And he told me that he just learned about the backburn, that his people were in meetings with BC Wildfire Service. They didn't even tell the foresters from the forest company with the tenure in that area. There was no consultation at all with them. And on this map here, you can see that this is the power line. Well, these cut blocks were just done in the spring, so they were covered in debris. This is the actual imagery of the backburn being maybe probably about 45 minutes after they had lit it. And they use a drip torch from a helicopter and drip napalm, burning napalm onto the treetops. And these are screenshots from a video provided by BC Wildfire Service. Then on the same day, by 5:17, the folks in Meadow Creek, and one of them is here tonight, or maybe more, they took this photo of the fire approaching Meadow Creek. And there's another photo right here that shows the helicopters. You can see them quite clearly there. This isn't working very well. But anyway, you can see those little dots. That's BC Wildfire Service. They knew what was going on. They were watching it. And soon, at 6:40, this is how it looked like in Scotch Creek. And at almost about 6 o'clock, so that's almost 3 hours after they had lit it, the fire was in Meadow Creek already. And this is what it looked like at 7 o'clock on line 17. It was a massive blaze. This is how it looked out on the lake at 7:30. This is back at Meadow Creek at 9:45. This is at Meadow Creek, and this is a video.
Oh shit.
This is at 11 o'clock, and there's another video. So it gives you what it's like to be right in the midst of a firestorm.
On top of the mountain on the other side.
But they were prepared at Meadow Creek. They had many sprinklers going that created a moisture dome at the end of the valley. And when the fire hit that dome, it split and went up on the hills on both sides. So it protected, it basically saved the homes in Meadow Creek. 8:30, this is the view from Sorrento. And shortly after that, the fire department drove up the Scotch Creek logging road and saw the fire was already at the creek. Here's some more shots from Sorrento, so you can see the progression of the fire. And then one photo from Scotch Creek. And here's an actual photo taken at 10:30 at the 670 Scotch Creek Main logging road. The fire was already there that night. And there was a BC Wildfire Service truck parked there, so they knew it was there. So this is at Scotch Creek at 2:35. You can see how far down it had gotten into the valley. This is the backburn. Okay, so here, what does the BC Wildfire Service tell us? This is their morning update on August 18th. They tell us that the planned ignition was mostly successful, with the exception of some impacts. And if you look closely at that image, you can see how they even admitted at that point that the burn had escaped into Scotch Creek. At 12:30 on August 18th, the fire was just right above Scotch Creek. And most people were concerned, but many people thought because the BC Wildfire Service said the planned ignition was a success, it put their minds at ease, so they didn't take off. They didn't get ready to evacuate. And yet, at 12:30, it was already there. At 1:30, there was a crew from Scotch Creek working on a fire guard in Roan's Field, which is just before the community of Scotch Creek. And a BC Wildfire Service helicopter landed. And normally anybody that rides in one of them would be like upper echelon management. He gets out, they talk to him. He said their communication was down. He didn't have a clue he couldn't tell him where the fire was. He couldn't tell him anything. And he'd just been up watching the whole thing. By 4:30, the other fire, the Bush Creek fire, which was on the other side of Adams Lake, on the west side, it had already made it to the fire camp. There was a fire camp set up at Squilax. 400 firefighters, some of them from Brazil, were there. The fire burned their camp down, so the BC Wildfire Service had a skedaddle back to Kamloops. So this is what it looked like at 4:30 along the straight stretch in Scotch Creek near the transfer station. Here's Roan's Field, ablaze at 5 o'clock. And gives you another idea what it's like to be in a firestorm.
This is no way. This is crazy.
This was taken by the Captain's Village Marina owner. And it's too dangerous for BC Wildfire Service, but people were still around driving on the roads. So this is before the fire hall burned, because you're going to see the fire hall right here in a minute.
Good.
So basically, what happens is embers start getting picked up in the wind.
House is on fire.
Ember pass, and that just carried. There's the fire hall. It hadn't burned yet.
Dean speaking. Good, Greg.
And right about now,
No, it's
he gets a
bad.
phone call from Cory Kyle.
We're losing
It is
structures
really
right now.
bad. Scotch Creek's half on fire. I'm just driving around. It's really bad. Well, they tried pushing everybody today. There's nobody at the fire hall.
Okay, on August 18th, we get a second update from BC Wildfire Service. They said, this is direct quote, it was a video, and we had it transcribed. So these are the exact words that BC Wildfire Service told the public of British Columbia. It's about trying to get people out of the way, ensuring that we're doing everything we can to protect homes and infrastructure. They weren't even there. Direct lies to the people of British Columbia. So they saw a very aggressive crown fire spreading quickly, and it was a very problematic. Oh my goodness, was it ever problematic for them? They were all in Kamloops by that point. And there's a view from the evacuation boats that they had to take people out by boat, and there's a view of the Scotch Creek log builders place on fire. Well, then the next day, we get another update from BC Wildfire Service. So what do? They want to offer their condolences to the people of the North Shuswap. Condolences are for people who's had someone die in their family. And that's quite an odd choice of words. And so they said the fires combined. They never did. They said the fire made a run in under 12 hours of over 20 kilometers. That's exactly what happened. And they said we developed a new plan to have structure protection and aviation resources working to protect structures there. Total lie. They were in Kamloops. There weren't any BC Wildfire Service here. There. So many had to evacuate by boat, and of course it was a windstorm, and the fire creates its own wind, so the lake was really rough. There was one elderly couple that missed getting out in time. They got in their boat in Scotch Creek and launched it, and it capsized. And fortunately, they didn't lose their life and got back on shore. So here's the update, the next update from BC Wildfire Service, in which they claim that the backburn was a success and saved hundreds of homes. Okay, I wish I had this. Oh, the pointer's working again. Okay, well, for those of you who don't really know the country, this really helps you. This is a Landsat imagery of the burn that was a satellite image from September 9th, so after the firestorm and most of the burning happened. So here's Lee Creek Heights, and here's Corny Creek here. Here's where the Cottonwoods is. Here's where the camp was evacuated. So the fire basically, the original fire was right up here, and they lit the backburn here, and the two didn't really meet that much, a little bit back and forth here. So the backburn basically swept down here and swept over there, and there's the Meadow Creek Valley right there. So you can see how it right at the end of the valley, the fire went up into the hills there and came down in the hills and went right to Solista.
Is that the backburn or the main fire?
That's the backburn did all that. The Bush Creek fire was on here, and that's all. Now the backburn could have influenced the Bush Creek fire because it was such a big fire that one fire can pull another one pull it towards it. So here's your 20 kilometers from where the Bush Creek fire went, and this shows the power line was 3.5 kilometers from the original fire, and the backburn was 10 kilometers away from Solista. So this shows where the fire boundary was as of August 16th. So you can see the original fire just went a little bit farther in that windstorm, whereas it was the backburn that burned us all out. Okay, so I'm going to have to really speed this up. These are some aerial photos, and our property is right in here. We lost 36 acres out of 40. This is the power line here. They lit the above the power line, and what happened is it went into the canyon and came under the power line and came into this canyon and then came back up here. And wherever you see it really black, that's where it burned the hottest. Where it's kind of brown like that, it wasn't as hot. And so it really cooked in here. And one thing that happens in a fire when there's a huge wind is it creates an effect in canyons that it accelerates the wind. And so it becomes like a blowtorch. And okay, so here's where they lit the fire. Right above the power line, and you can see how what happened was the power line was covered in dead brush because it had been slashed in the spring by BC Hydro. And they do that every 5-10 years. And so the dead brush was laying on the ground. They lit that backburn, and the wind switched. It hit that dead brush, and it went whipping down that power line right over to Meadow Creek and over Scotch Creek. There's another shot of it, and you can see where the backburn was and where it escaped into the community. And this is Lee Creek, another shot of Lee Creek, and you can see how it snuck down in Lee Creek Canyon, and the wind's blowing strong. I think it's called a Venturi effect. You got any scientists here? But that's what happens when the wind gets into a canyon. And this is an amazing shot here because you can see the power line and you can see all the way off in the distance on the top right is Calista. So you can see how that fire in the space of, it was lit at 3:15 and it hit Calista at 4 o'clock the next day. So the fire, this is where the fire was on the night of the 16th, and it really didn't escape much because there was this dense spruce balsam forest there that was damp. And so their models show that it would have burned, but it never burned. That forest prevented the fire from going where they thought it was going to go. And there's another shot of it. On the left is the fire from the original fire, the Adams Lake fire, and on the right is that dense forest. So then we got some more news from the Globe and Mail. I wasn't the only one to submit a complaint on the behalf of our community. There was a Brazilian crew up there working on the backburn, on the power line, and they were trapped. The fire swept over them, and they were stuck up there for 3 hours. And there were other workers up there trapped. And so the BC Government Employees Union filed a complaint a few days after the firestorm. And in their complaint, they asked for whoever lit that backburn to be fired. That's the BC Government Employees Union. And at the same time, WorkSafe BC started an investigation. So currently, those two organizations are now working together with BC Wildfire Service to produce what they're calling a facilitated learning document. Okay, many of you might have seen this weekend, a big news story came out. The data that the BC Wildfire Service uses is inaccurate. It's only there's only a few fuel types that they think exists out there, where in reality there's far more. So what BC Wildfire Service does is they have all these people on computers trying to figure out how to fight the fire, sitting in offices staring at computers. That's the modern day. That's what's going on. And what they have in the computers is inaccurate. So on the left here is the diagram from the Globe and Mail, and it shows where they thought the fire was going to go. And so my pointer isn't working, but basically, there we go. Their modeling showed that the existing fire would spread all the way through up in here and go down there, and so that's why they had to light the backburn. This is their modeling that they used.
Why at that hour of the day though?
Which was totally inaccurate. Now the very latest news is last year BC Wildfire Service did a $1 million sole source contract for an unreliable wildfire modeling software from a Spanish corporation developed for California. And they were using this to justify their aerial ignition. So in this slide, we took the orange line, which was the projected fire boundary. It's weird how this thing works sometimes. And it shows where they thought the fire was going to go, and then and it shows where the fire was, and then the red line is where it was, and then you can see all the brown. That's where the fire actually went from their backburn. So BC Wildfire Service initially said that the damage in Scotch Creek and Calista was caused by the Adams Lake fire going up and around their backburn and coming back down and hitting Calista and Scotch Creek. That's what they told them. But now what they're saying is these little spot fires is what caused all the damage.
Spot fire, see, I had that out the day before the fire.
Yeah, spot fire. Spot fire C was put out the day before. Spot fire B was, they dumped water on it all day on the 17th, and so it was pretty dampened out. And spot fire A, the crew, the residents of Meadow Creek had their eyes on it. It never grew. It just stayed there. So these are scenes of the devastation. If you haven't been out there to the North Shuswap, this is what you will see, or what you would have seen, but much of this has been cleaned up now. So this is Scotch Creek. The middle shot there, that's the fire hall, or what that was the fire hall.
Still chairs left.
This is Solista. Now, I did all this analysis, and a lot of things that happened on Facebook, and somebody posted an editorial by a forester by the name of, a retired forester by the name of Bruce Morrill that was very critical of the BC Wildfire Service. So I got a hold of him, he came out and he did an analysis of the backburn. And here's what he found. It failed, the burn off failed to meet the basic standards and principles of controlled burning. And he's an expert in controlled burns. There were incomplete control lines. They burned in front of a wind event. Ignition pattern made the fire too hot. Too large a burn off area. Poor fuel break. So it was a high risk activity with little chance of success. And he's an expert, 35 years of experience. And that's his assessment. So this is sort of the conclusion to the story about the backburn. Irresponsible gross negligence. The existing fire did not pose as great a risk to the North Shuswap as the BC Wildfire Service assumed. They delayed issuing their evacuation. I haven't talked about that much, but I think one of the next speakers, Jay Simpson, will be talking about that. They did nothing to stop the spread of it. The use of misinformation is purposely deceitful and was done and is continuing to be done to cover up their most obvious mistake. And they, by announcing that the backburn was a success and delaying the evacuation order, created extreme risk to citizens that they are mandated to protect. It was only thanks to the heroism of local citizens and first responders that lives were not lost. So many of you read about the heroes of the North Shuswap. About 300 people stayed behind. Loggers, ranchers, contractors. They saved countless homes and properties. During both the Firestorm on the 18th and during spot fires the following week. Others helped by cooking and cleaning. Neighborhood groups cooperated, and often one home served as the place for meals and meetings. Meanwhile, BC Wildfire Service evacuated when their camp burned and did not return for upwards of a week in some areas. And that's a very powerful image taken from a video of the effort of the Captain's Village team, the Actons, in saving what was some of the log building facility there. And so this is just some of these local heroes. This is how their equipment looked. Pretty funky, but quite worked really well.
Very effective. Yeah.
Meanwhile, we lived for 2 or 3 weeks. It was a police state over in the North Shuswap. They brought in a SWAT team from Vancouver. They set up blockades. They used spike belts on the roads. On the water, people from Sorrento, Blind Bay, Chase were bringing supplies. So they launched police boats and tried stopping them and threatened to take people's boats away and fine them. But despite the police presence, locals found ways to circumvent the police and as a result, the community is now much stronger. Well, here's a photo of one of the boats coming in with supplies. So now the situation's going from bad to worse because the provincial government has got a new legislation and it's been passed, and it's their new Emergency and Disaster Management Act. So now if a person commits an offense, basically it ignores an evacuation order, they could be imprisoned for a year, they could be fined $100,000, and if it's a company, it could be fined $1 million. So the situation's going from bad to worse. So these are some legal issues. If there's any law students in the audience, you might think about these things. Basically, the Wildfire Act establishes policies and priorities for the efficient use of fire control. For fire control, it doesn't mention anywhere in the Act that they should extinguish fires. They're only ordered to control them. So the minister may, in the Act, the minister has the ability to designate a specific area as a restricted area, but it says they can hire temporary employees and order persons to assist and compensate them. So they have the ability to do that, but instead they dictate. The policy dictates that independent contractors cannot extinguish fires. And another big issue is, and this is the first thing that I tried to work on after the firestorm, is how can we sue the government? We were talking about a class action suit. Well, in the Wildfire Act, there's an indemnity clause that basically says no legal proceedings for damages lies or may be commenced or maintained against a protected person because of anything done or omitted. So basically, they're totally protected. You cannot sue the government. So we've got a campaign now to reform the BC Wildfire Service. And our current petition, which now has over 3,300 signatures, and this is the one I took to Victoria, is basically, it was written, the author is actually here, who wrote much of what's there, but it was all prepared by experts and people with lots more knowledge on this than I have. And so these are the failures that we've identified. Their over-centralized command structure, their failure to attack wildfires hard and fast, inadequate air attack resources for initial attack, inability to effectively manage heavy equipment, refusal to utilize local resources in a meaningful way, counterproductive evacuation orders, inappropriate use of planned ignitions, and they do not value honesty. So the solutions that we've come up with in our petition is that we want to see them fund and plan for refocusing wildfire suppression efforts on initial attack programs that will hit fires hard in high-risk forests. Utilize local resources as all other provinces do. For some reason, this province is not behind the 8 ball. They're just somewhere else. We want to see them minimize the import of out-of-province crews wherever possible and establish more wildfire crews within BC. Directly contact and sign up all forestry heavy equipment operators and reestablish the fire warden system. At one time, there were over 500 fire wardens. They were located in every community, and every fire warden had a number of people he could call in an emergency. And often these fire wardens would be the first one on a fire and have it out before BC Wildfire Service even found out about it. And when there were fires, they were out there making sure that campfires were put out and just monitoring the situation. Local eyes. but the BC Wildfire Service didn't like the fire warden system, and it's over with. And in the long term, we need a new plan for all components of wildfire management. Okay, some questions for you to ponder. And my wife Kathy came up with this this term. Probably many of you have heard of Eisenhower when he said it's America becoming the military-industrial complex. Well, what is happening in this province and maybe other parts of North America? Are we turning into a wildfire industrial complex? So some questions about that. I mean, after all, they spent nearly $1 billion last year. So why are wildfires allowed to grow to become project fires, which opens the funding floodgate to hire more workers in inefficient helicopters? Are contractors and property owners prevented from fighting fires because they are taking the jobs from unionized wildfire staff? Has firefighting become overly professionalized, overly bureaucratic, and overly computerized, causing more waste of money? Why are they relying on more shovel, Pulaski, and hose workers when heavy equipment does a far better job? I mean, we're sending rockets to outer space for how many decades and we can't put out a fire? Goodness sakes. And why does costly incompetence, as evidenced by the growing number of homes and hectares burnt, continue? Just like with the military, there's money being made. Okay, the next speaker is our area district representative, one of the North Shuswap heroes, because when everybody was asked to leave, to evacuate, Jay Simpson stayed behind. And he had to endure some harsh treatment by his colleagues. So we'll bring Jay up here and he can tell you about what it's like to be a district director in a fire zone.
Thanks, Jim. Well, it's hard to follow Jim because he's got all these awesome pictures and stories and things that are going on, and I appreciate the fact that he has taken as much time as he did to put all this together. Early in the fire, he called me and I said, you know, Jim, I don't have an opportunity, I don't have the capacity to document what's going on here. Why don't you do it? And he took it and ran, and this is the result. And he's been running ever since the fire, so I want to thank Jim a lot. Speak up closer to the microphone. Got it. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm Jay Simpson. I live in Lee Creek. Jim pointed that out on the map a couple of times. I stayed behind during the fire. I have a small farm there. We have about 15 lambs, some goats, chickens, things like that. And I've got a large irrigated field that's between me and where the fire was going to be. And I've got the lake on the backside. So I was in a pretty protected position, and I said, I'm going to stay. And I did fight fire kind of the first day, but it quickly became obvious that I wasn't the best one out there. And there were a lot of other fires that I had to go and put out. The first couple of days were very hectic. I mean, unbelievably so. My phone started texting and ringing and phone calls coming in and talking about all of the things that, all of the places that fires were going. And I spent a bunch of time just trying to organize resources and sending people from one area to another. If we get a fire put out over here, then we'd send them over there. Actually, I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, and I should be talking a little bit about the evacuation, which was a bit of a shit show. So on, I guess on the 17th, they started getting things rolling with the backburn, and we were all really concerned. And prior to that, the CSRD had told me and other people that we should get people out of there because it looks like it's going to be ugly. And the alert was on, but they hadn't made the evacuation order in place. And certainly, I talked to the local provincial park in Scotch Creek, and I said, you should warn people that there's something coming down the pike and they should get out of there. And they did, and about 90% or so of the people that were camping at Scotch Creek left pretty rapidly. And sitting from my house and looking back onto the hillside, the road, Squanax-Sangamon Road goes right behind me, and you could see these just caravans of trailers and trucks and all kinds of things, just getting the hell out of town, and that was good. I talked to the park operators, a little bit later, actually, the morning of Friday, and I said, everybody out? And they said, well, just about, but there's a few people that they will not go until the order is made. Okay, whatever. We can't make them go. The order is made, and so people are allowed to stay. As the day progressed, we could see things were getting much worse. We were having conversations with the CSRD, and they said, we haven't had any word from BC Wildfires that an order should be coming through, so we can't put an order in place without that. So we wait, and we see the fire coming down, and I heard from the transfer station operator, about 12:30, he called the office of the CSRD and said, right across the road from me, the fire is coming down the hill, can I leave? The CSRD says, no, that's your job. You have to stay there until the end of your shift, 2 o'clock. Well, 1 o'clock, he just said, fuck this, I'm leaving. And he got out, and good for him. I mean, but still at that point, the order wasn't there. So, the order, BC Wildfires, and truly I don't know the specific times of all of these things because they really didn't keep me in the loop on much of this, but at one point in the afternoon, BC Wildfires told them that, okay, it's time to put an order in. And okay, well that's great. Now the CSRD, they have a process, and they have to get the chair of the board to sign off on this order. So the chair is probably not sitting there waiting for an order to come in. They have to go and find the chair. And so it's an hour or more after they get word from BC Wildfires before they can actually get the chair of the board to sign off on the order and put the order through. And so, it's the process, the way that things are done is not set up to make things quick or easy. And even when the decisions are made, it still takes a while for those decisions to be actually put into effect. And so the order comes through, the CSRD gets the sign off from the chair, and they put out the notice on their Alertable app, which is an app that they have been suggesting that people from the North Shuswap and everywhere in the CSRD area in general download onto their phones so that they can keep them up to date. And it kind of works most of the time, but at this particular moment when people are needing to get that message, it certainly turns out that there are a number of people that never got that message. And whether it's the cell towers or whatever else was in play there were certainly a number of people that did not get those orders right away. And so that's another kind of step in the process that delays action. By the time the order did come in, the roads in Scotch Creek by this transfer station, by the Scotch Creek Bridge, were engulfed, and many people could not get out. And so where do you go? Well, you go east. You go up to Anglemont, you go up to St. Ives, you head to Seymour Arm, and many people did. And then Seymour Arm, of course, is the Shuswap in the summer, 14,000 people. Our regular population is 3,200. So a lot of these people heading east, they went to Seymour Arm and then tried to get from there to Malacqua, which is where the number one highway hits the back roads. And that's about 60 kilometers of really ugly road. It's not maintained in any kind of a good shape. We had grandmas driving their Toyota Corollas out this narrow, windy back road at night. and there's flat tires, there's cars stuck, there's, if you try to come, it's a one-lane road, try to come the other way, you have to back up a ways to look at and find somewhere to scooch around. It's just, again, a shit show. We ended up, it was about 5 o'clock on Friday that I talked to the CSRD and they said, yeah, we're gonna try to evacuate people by boat. And I said, well, do you need some more boats? They said, yeah, we could use some more boats. So I put out on text, okay, we need some boats in Scotch Creek. We're gonna get people from Scotch Creek over to the Shuswap Marina in Sorrento. And I headed down there with my boat. And we sat around, and we sat around, and we saw a bunch of firefighters and trucks like right on the beach there. And we sat around and what's going on? I called the CSRD, where is everybody? Well, we're trying to get everybody organized. Okay, so about an hour and a half later, 6:30 or so, my wife says, okay, the fire's coming down the hill behind our place. You should get your ass back here. So I phoned the CSRD and said, okay, well look, you've got a couple of search and rescue boats here. There's nobody on the beach that wants to go anywhere, so we're bugging out. So that's kind of the, again, slow process that we're going to learn so much from this. I hope, or God, I hope. Cross my fingers. We haven't had an after CSRD in their evacuation plans. Okay, that's what I hope. We haven't had the after action report or interviews done, so I hope we make some changes. Anyway, there we are. That's the evacuation. It was just a huge mismanagement. Throughout the fire, I spent most of my time really on putting out other fires. Trying to move, the first couple of days we were trying to move, like I said, people and equipment to different places where the fires were hot. And we were able to do that. They hadn't shut down the bridges, they hadn't closed off access from Lee Creek to Scotch Creek or Scotch Creek to Solista. So we were doing that. We were making some progress on those types of things, and then in comes the bridge blockades and the police and everybody else, and shuts everything down. I'm on the phone to the CSRD, okay, what's going on? Well, nobody's supposed to be leaving their house. The rules in the Wildfire Act say that if you stay behind and you want to protect your house, that's okay. But you have to stay on your lot. And I say, so I can't go next door and put out a fire on my neighbor's lot? No, you have to stay on your lot. So we have these blockades at the bridges so that people will at least stay within their communities. And that was sure a pain in the ass because we were trying to get diesel to water pumps in Scotch Creek. We've got Spooner's Spooner equipment has got big cans of diesel and gas and everything else. Trying to move supplies around was horrible. We couldn't do it. We were ferrying it around by boat. We were talking to people. Actually, fortunately, the co-op gas station in Scotch Creek was still open. It was still running. And we were able to get gas and diesel out of there, but that serviced only Scotch Creek because you couldn't get up to Solista, etc. So, that was a serious challenge. There was a blockade in Sorrento. Bunch of activists, because the police were on the #1 highway, right? And they were blocking that off because, well, the fire was, of course, crossed the little river there at Squilax and went up the mountain. And so these activists went and thought, well, we'll try to go in and try to help out the North Shuswap. So they went and talked to the police. And, this is the typical Shuswap blockade, 10 people walking up and talking to a bunch of policemen. That's pretty much what it was. But it scared off BC wildfires, and they said, well, we can't come in there. It's dangerous. So there I am putting out another fire. Fortunately, by that time, I had a contact with BC Wildfires. They'd come in on the Tuesday and actually had a conversation with us. So I knew somebody would call. And I said, look, that's not us. Why do you think we would do something stupid enough to send BC Wildfires out of our area? We need you guys. we can't fight this fire without you. So they got a little more comfortable, I guess, with what was going on, and they did come back in. You know, over the next few weeks, it was just really trying to work with the CSRD, trying to get supplies in, all these freezers that were without power for 2 weeks, right? That was a big problem. Dead and rotting meat, things like that. And, you know, the people that were in, the 300 that were there, a number of them were, well, typically the guys were out fighting fires, the gals were making sandwiches, getting water out, but they were also going and emptying freezers for neighbors and stuff like that. Well, what do you do with all this stuff? So BC, CSRD, we need to get some cans in so that we can throw all this stuff away, otherwise it's going to be really, really nasty. We had problems like people trying to get to cancer treatments in Kamloops. You know, how do people from the other side of the blockades get into Kamloops for cancer treatments? Or how do we get prescriptions in to these people? So, I mean, all of these things had not been thought of prior to the fire. You know, don't we have fires every year? Haven't we had fires every year for many years? Haven't we gone through this before? Haven't we learned any lessons?
None.
It just amazes me that we can be so unprepared. So I don't know where we're going to go for this. Certainly, you know, I hope that we find a way to learn lessons from all of this. I know that the CSRD is not happy with me. They were very unhappy with me. I can put it in so many ways. That I stayed behind. I don't know. They thought I guess I should have been the Pied Piper leading people out of town or something. But I guess that's not me. And you know, I was helpful being where I was, but there's a little bit of shit going on in the boardroom right now. But that's a different story, and when I can talk about it, I will. Anyway, you know, I don't know if we've got Q&As coming up or anything else. I know that Carl wants to speak, and we also have another couple. So I'll get off the stage. Happy to chat, email me, text me, whatever. Always happy to talk about this.
Can I ask if
Thanks.
there's anybody from the BC Wildfire Service who had the balls to come to this thing tonight?
You should save the questions for the end, if that's all right.
I got a short answer to that. That's no. The CSRD is just 2 seconds. CSRD is now putting on 5 series of community open houses basically over the next week in Sorrento and Anglemont, Solista, etc. BC Wildfires is not coming to any of those. What do you do? Carl, one of the heroes of the North Shuswap. Family and friends spent weeks fighting the fire. We couldn't have done it without them.
I normally make stumps for a living and run a ranch, but I'll try and get through this. Good evening, my name is Carl Bischoff. I currently reside in Magna Bay on Homestead Quarters section. Just bear with me. Got my great uncle Matt, 1914. We currently run a small cow-calf operation. This is where the East Adams Lake fire ended, approximately 30 kilometers of fire-burnt mountains. I just want to reflect back to early July when the east and west lightning strikes occurred on Adams Lake. The question I have to ask, did they put a budget on these 2 fires? West Adams Lake Fire, 2 separate well-experienced logging contractors offered their equipment to push guards and were turned down. East Fire Forestry literally walked away from it after a few days of fighting. And it brought to the public's attention it was safe and was burning away from civilian areas. Fast forward to August, when the cold front was coming in, Forestry decides to do a massive 10-kilometer backburn at 4 p.m. when locals know damn well the drafts start around 5 off the mountains. Within a short hours, all hell broken loose as the backburn had crossed the big hydro lines and worked its way south towards North Shuswap residents. The back end of Meadow Creek was all on fire by 8 p.m. with crews scrambling to save houses. Further west, the fire had crossed the Lee Creek draw, and I might add, they never even put a flipping guard down the draw. So the fire raced down the Lee Creek draw, comes up on top, splits, takes all the most of Scotch Creek and Lee Creek out in a fork system. The following day, the fire worked east away from Meadow Creek Valley onto Mount Evans, and about 3 p.m. it crested the mountain from the backside. And down it came in about 45 minutes, starting its devastation on the back bench of Line 17, burning up farms, barns, 2 historical homestead quarter section barns, the Delines and the Stankovich properties. Both lost 2 large hand-hewed log barns, history gone forever. These barns were built over 100 years ago. At 6 p.m., the fire had reached the ranch, crossing the large Onyx Creek Draw off Crowfoot Mountain. The following morning, family members jumped on heavy equipment and pushed a guard about 1,000 feet up on the east side of Onyx Creek. I drove around and jumped on Frank Riley's D7 Cat and pushed about 700 feet of guard on the west side. By 9 o'clock that morning, and I had phoned no one for water tankers, trucks, pumps, nothing. About 10 local pickup trucks from Seymour to, I would say, Slister all showed up and asked, where can we help? And I just basically gave open directions. I'm very fortunate. I have a 3-inch main on a gravity feed with 90 pounds of pressure that feeds water to the house. And in 4 minutes, we could fill up those 400-gallon totes. And they were down and gone. But the bad thing is on the west side, we couldn't get water unless we went to the creeks. And it's just slow, running pipes down the hill, whatever. So I phoned Chase to my brother-in-law, Ken, to get the big trucks out of Chase from Maddie's, and they were turned back for 3 days by the cops. And on the 4th day, common sense set in, and they showed up. And a big thank you to the Engmont fire trucks, and one gentleman was sitting right here. So they had the big fire trucks, and they literally backed into the 3,000-gallon trucks, and we started pumping water to the hot spots. And I just want to get off the paper. This is kind of a good one to share, a bit of humor, whatever. But we had a fire in the draw, and you have to understand the Onyx Creek draw is about 3 to 4 miles long, whatever, from Crowfoot right down into Shuswap Lake. And the hot spots were just on the upper bench, and this massive big fir trees, steep, extremely steep ground and spots. And we had a fire of about a half acre, and it was burning hot. We had 1,000 feet of fire hose out and 500 feet down to get this fire. All grunt work, packing hoses out, down they go. So my son and myself, we're both certified haulers. We went in ahead and we fell probably half a truckload of extremely tall, dangerous, dead snags. They had to come down. You do an evaluation, but these had to come down. They were just tired trees. And some we could miss the fire, and some we had to put in the fire, which created more fuel. But on a comical point of view, 1,000 feet of hose out, and we teed it off. So Daryl Hicks, he was on the upper bench, chasing spot fires to his right. And we had about 8 or 10 guys down in this 500 feet down, pulling hoses and spraying water below. You can imagine the pressure. But down below, Jody, the local, he radios back to the fire truck and he says, "Can you turn the pressure up a bit?" Yeah, gotcha. So they're communicating back and forth, and yeah, perfect. So at that stage, Jody jumps up in the stump, hits the nozzle, and blows him right off the back of the stump. So he gets a bit of a hissy fit. So he runs to get on top of the stump again. Well, meanwhile, Daryl turns his water off up top. So now he's getting full pressure right down to the bottom. And when he jumped up on the stump the second time, it literally launched him backwards on his back. Anyways, let's get back to the paperwork. We're going to get through this. Anyways, we fought this thing for 10 days, Well, hold on. For about 10 days, numerous residents' homes fed many firefighters, depending on whatever they were fighting in. My crew was not the only firefighters. West at Meadow Creek, both brothers Ralph and Ian and Dave Dyke's teams fought hard for 10 days with the help of Ralph's D7. Just keep looking back, sorry.
Doing good.
On the extensive guards, Evans Road west to Leopold Mountain. Further west to Scotch Creek was Dean Acton's crew of 20 to 30. One very large spot fire right by next to the provincial park. They put that out. Probably would have lost the park if it wasn't the guys there literally, because there were no firefighters, no forestry fire guys were around. The Lee Creek was the Spooner teams. All told, I would estimate there was about 200 volunteers. The sad part of all this is the evening news informed the public that a bunch of rogue North Shuswap volunteer firefighters got in the road of the BC wildfire crews for doing their job. Well, for the record, there was no BC wildfires helping until day 6 when they started at Lee Creek working east with the volunteer crews. On the 9th day, they finally came to us at the base of Crowfoot Mountain.
Never hit my place, the 12th.
So the question is, how do we prevent this from happening again? I've thought about this a bit, and I think forestry aerial fire assessment has to be improved to where they communicate far quicker with water bombers and boots on the ground. In the event they run short on manpower, because at times if you have lots of lightning strikes, they don't have the manpower to chase these things up. They should call upon the local fire departments in which they would be trained. Hold on. They'd call upon our local fire department in which they would call the trained volunteer rapid fire response teams to deal with the small fires. And that's us locals. And that's with no strings attached. We get the training done. We get communication from Forestry, whoever, we go. We can come as we want, we can leave us with any time we want. There's no strings attached, and we do it for free. In closing, we as North Shuswap residents have been branded bad by these 2 fires, which quite easily could have been put out. All we ask is the Forestry to work with us and not against us. Thanks.
Okay, next up we've got Alan, and I'm just going to get his PowerPoint up here.
Don't worry, I'm short.
Here we go, Alan.
There we go. You just advance right here.
Okay. Okay. So look, guys, I've been a BC forester for, I don't know, 45 years, something like that. So I'm not just from Ontario. I worked here for industry, actually, Canfor, and we put out fires. I did, with my guys, we did probably 100 prescribed fires in the good old days. And most of the time our biggest problem back then, and I wish I could fight fires now because I'd probably lose some weight, but I remember being pretty skinny when I was a young forester because that's what we did a lot. Mostly we lit fires for forestry in the good old days. We used to have to put a large slash burn fires, and we are fully equipped in our division. We had pumpers, we had all of our guys were trained in. This was before BC Forest Service at the time really did any firefighting, so our guys ended up in interior, being divisional bosses of fires and everything else. So those were the days when contractors and loggers were part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I've worked in 2 provinces, and I'm not going to give you all the details of, actually it's close to 50 years of forestry, but my life has been always interrupted in the summer because of fires. So I've done everything in fires, but the one I'm going to really talk about right now, and I know there's a lot of emotion in here, but I'm going to kind of drill it down a little bit to what I did in my last job. And I was the guy behind the curtain. I was the guy in charge of a very large program, fire program, as well as everything else. And I just can't believe what I hear here. I believe it, but it's freaking amazing what I'm hearing, because it's just such a screwed up system. And I've listened. I live in the Okanagan and still trying not to work as a consultant. But I live in Okanagan. I've been watching these guys fight fires for about 5 years now, and it's makes me cry. And it really made me cry last year, when they almost burned my house down. So that made me cry even more. So here's a few ideas for you people. In some ways, I used a metaphor that I'm not. You guys are really full of emotion, just like the Wizard of Oz. What's the name of that little girl that had to click their heels together? Dorothy, yeah, who was trying to get home. And you guys are trying to get home to a world where you're not burning up every summer, right? And I'm kind of the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. I don't have any miracle solutions for you. But it's all within you guys here in this room to make a difference and change the world. And it's maybe not exactly the way you think it is. So there might be some ideas I might float at you that might get this thing to another level, I hope, or maybe not. But I'm not a guy from Ontario telling you what to do. I live here. So in my world, it's totally different to what you have in British Columbia. I was the director of natural resources for a third of Ontario. And my province was, my region was the fire region. I had 6 415 bombers at my disposal. I had numerous other aircraft. I actually did aerial detection. I had 10 aircraft go out every day looking for the fires, which we don't have here, by the way, that I know of. I don't believe we do. But the interesting thing here, and I've heard it so many times here already, is that the public was a big part of our firefighting. We had, we didn't call them fire wardens, but we had resource technicians, technicians in every major community, First Nation and non-First Nation. We had initial attack crews in many of those communities, manned by First Nations, and contracts with municipalities. What can I tell you? It was totally integrated because we had to be integrated. We needed the thousands of people if we had a bad fire here, and we used them. There's never any of these issues of turf, for heaven's sakes. I don't understand that. I just don't understand that. How can you protect people, not your job, if you have turf battles? And that's what we've seen here. It's amazing. It's beyond understanding for me. I was 8 years at this, so I'm not a rookie here, and I got grandchildren, so I'm not a kid anymore. So you had the public that was into everything I did. I looked after forests, lands, fish and wildlife, floods, fire, everything. I had 500 staff, actually 800 staff, counting the fire people that worked in my organization. So what my job specifically mostly was, I had a phenomenal fire machine I call it the machine, that we set the targets. And when I saw what happened in Kelowna this year, or West Kelowna, 5 kilometers from my house, walking my dog at 6 in the morning, I saw a plume of smoke going up there, a small one. And there's absolutely no action on that thing at all. And then I hear the next day that the damn thing started. They detected it probably by WestJet the day before, and they haven't done anything with it. And my guess is the damn fire had been going for maybe 12 hours before I saw it, at least. Maybe 18. In my world, I would have had 3 tankers on there and 2 crews on there. And I'm not exaggerating, folks. You can go call them, they'll tell you this. Within an hour of detection. And that's I can't believe what I saw there. I'm still mad. And that's not the first one. That just happened to be by my house. There were several others I watched. So I should hit the next button. But the main thing is here, folks, is it was totally integrated. The whole thing's integrated in my world that I existed in. The problems I'm hearing, we had problems. People didn't like us sometimes, but I talked to a general manager of one of the biggest forest companies this morning. He called me at 5 in the morning, thought it was 8, and he was asking about fires and stuff. And he said, I said to him, what did you think about when we were looking after fire? How did you think about it? He said, you guys are really good. You made some mistakes, but you always talk to us. And that's why the communication with industry and the public always happened, because that was a big part. If I didn't do that, I was the most senior guy for resource management in a third of the province, me. If the public was really upset with what I did, be it fire, fish and wildlife, or forestry, my job was on the line. And I think I did a pretty good job. So that whole discussion thing and having like a CIA unit, this funnel that comes down from forestry, ADM reporting to a deputy minister is absolutely totally disjointed from your world and the world of the rest of the resource managers in BC. It doesn't make sense. I had parks, I had everything in the same management team. And that's the way it should be. Now, we're not going to change that. But that's probably the reason why you got a big problem. They built an empire here, folks. That's the problem. In my experience, I would say. Now, am I going to press up? Do I hit enter?
No, button on the far right.
There. Okay, so my house is amongst that. And that's the McDougall Creek. I was on McDougall Creek. The good news there, if you look carefully, the wind was blowing the other way. So I was out in the street telling the neighbors, don't panic, we're okay. Just wet things down if you can. And anyways, that's the thing that got me really mad this year. And that fire, that was probably, I was 6 o'clock in the morning, walking my dog, and there was absolutely no action on that fire, nothing. Just like all the other ones I've seen, and they have no initial attack. They have not. They say they do, but they just plain don't. They're fibbing. And they actually put a Castanet news release out about a week or 2 after this, because they knew they screwed up. And they put all this stuff about putting crews up there and everything. I never saw anything. I would have seen it all. I would have seen the skimmers. I would have seen. I was right there, and I saw nothing. So I'm either getting really old and senile, or they're fibbing me a little bit, maybe. Eh? So I think that's another thing is there's mentioning about honesty. I can't believe that the rank and file guys are dishonest, not working really hard, because they are. It's the whole setup that this funnel is coming to us from Victoria that has to be changed, so it's linked in with everybody. Okay, so another part of my little hobby that I did, I reorganized. I don't know why I did it, but they always made me in 2 different provinces to reorganize everything by using business plans. So what the big problem with this particular organization is, they don't have a business plan at all. I can see. But don't forget, I'm not the guy in the fire center anymore. I'm the guy in the dirt walking the dog. So maybe I don't know better. But I don't see a business plan here. From what I hear from everybody, and I've talked to numerous people, Same stories. Industry guys are told to go to hell, you're not part of it, practically. They don't say that in so many words, to be fair. But they say, no, we don't want your help. Go away. We'll be there. 3 days later. No.
4 days, 10 days.
Whatever, yeah. You get the point, right? So right here you got, this is the first part of the business plan of a fire organization. Is you got, prevention, fire smart, community prep. Now the community prep is really important. Those are 2 words. My organization spent years to building up the rapport with the communities, industry, and everything else. It takes years to do it. They got contracts, they know what they're supposed to do, they know when there's a fire, go put the damn thing out, they know how to do it, they got the equipment, they got the fire trucks, they got the tankers. That's like we used to have tankers, they had tankers. I don't see many industry tankers anymore. One industry guy told me here that they don't have tankers anymore. I said, what? But they don't have tankers because, well, they don't want us to use them. That's what I was told by this one guy that, was a woodlands manager. He's retired too, or trying to be retired. And Fire Smart is really interesting. Fire Smart's 2 words, but there's Fire Smart and there's real Fire Smart. When I was in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, you may have heard the 2003 fire, and some BC Wildlife Service guy said he was there and it didn't really happen. But it actually did if you check Google. 2003, we had to evacuate 14,000 people in Prince Albert. And it was in the mistletoe jack pine forest. It went crazy. I was the executive director for Forest Service in Saskatchewan. There's a lot of trees in Saskatchewan, believe it or not. 60% of the province. Anyways, this fire came roaring down. It started at a start. I saw the lightning actually hit the trees. I was up high and saw it. And we put the bombers on right away. We made a mistake though, because we didn't put the initial attack crews in there. It's okay to put the bombers down, but you have to have the initial attack crews surround it, and they got to stay there till it's up. Well, we didn't put the crews in fast enough, and the fire conditions were just as bad as the one in McDougall. Don't tell me PC's worse. That's bullshit. When you're in Jack Pine, it's like kerosene. It blows right out, and you know what it's like. So anyways, we didn't put the crews in, but we thought we had the damn thing out. So I went home. Good, I can have a rest. Get a phone call. They say, Al, look out the window. 6,000 feet up. Black, brown. That's not a good sign when you get that color, right? Going up, and I was back evacuating people and going crazy. But interesting enough, 4 years before that, we had built a 1 kilometer, I'm getting to the point finally, 1 kilometer buffer, took out all the trees, took out all the vegetation surrounding Prince Albert. And guess what? It stopped it. And so that's Fire Smart. And I flew over and I couldn't believe it. However, don't forget, we had 12 bombers, big ones, retardant as well as the 215s. They're almost as good as 450s. They actually stopped the spot fires that were flying into Prince Albert across the river. So you didn't see any of that in McDougall. Saw a few little helicopters dropping around, but I heard that Kamloops had three 415s sitting at the tarmac. My friend from Saskatchewan said he offered 3 more, and they turned them down past year. So I'll get to that a little bit more. The next important thing is detection. I had 10 aircraft going every day, and that was a big part. It's a third of the province, probably half of BC. But we had routes where the detection aircraft would be going every day, except when it's low. We didn't send them out then, but when it's certainly high and extreme, we sent them out. Had a pilot and a detection expert, observer. And we sent them out every day. We caught the fires. We knew of course everybody knows where the lightning strikes are. Caught the fires before they were big, and the bombers were out putting them out. We didn't have a lot of big fires in Ontario. We had a few, because 96% of the time we put them out, 4% we had a fire. So we were still busy, but that's what you got to do. So you have to have detection, and the public's okay, but this outfit doesn't, wants WestJet to see the fires, or they want people phoning it in. You gotta have aerial detection, or maybe it's drones now, I don't know, but I doubt it, because the drones maybe don't have can't fly as far as, and they're not as good quite yet as the aircraft. The biggest important part, and we brought a $90 million budget proposal in Saskatchewan, and we're successful, and that's ignition. Initial pack. I had 40 crews, 4-person crews, 6 bombers, and that's initial pack. We didn't use those crews too much on anything else but initial pack. 50% of our budget in Ontario, I'm jumping ahead, Saskatchewan, they did the initial attack program, got some new bombers and everything. But in Ontario, half of the program, in my program, was actually planes sitting there and waiting for the sparks to fly. You got to do that. We had nothing like that in Okanagan, folks. It was somewhere else. There was nothing there for us. We had to wait a day or two before anything came. Same with you guys. They're putting all their money into the big programs because they can tap into the emergency funds. And I'll get to that in a sec. So bottom line is, initial TAC is critical. It's no different than a fire department in your city or town. They sit at professional firefighters in the city, they sit around until there's a fire. But when there's a fire, they're 5 or 6 minutes, and everybody complains, oh yeah, they're cooking brownies or something at the fire hall, but they're ready for a fire, and they're there within 5 minutes. That's initial attack. We don't have that in our fire program. We should be able to hit any of those fires within an hour of any of our big communities. Exactly. Within an hour, and we did. That was our target. 5 minutes if you're a fire department, an hour when you've got firefighting, and that's talking about crews being rappelled down, and they stay there overnight. My daughter was at one for 6 years, and she said to me this fall, Dad, these guys, they go home every night. He said, we brought tents, and that's because she was here. Not this year, but a few years ago. So it's a different setup, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. That's a key thing. Half your program, initial attack, and there's nothing in Okanagan. I don't know what anywhere else, but I don't see initial attack in this province. Oh, they say they have initial attack. 3-man crew with a pickup truck went to McDougall Creek. We don't know when. That's true. And then the other part was the helicopter pilots offered to bomb the damn thing. They said, no, don't bother. Have you heard that before? I've heard that about 100 times. So what happens is you got your big fire management, people resources, backfires, community involvement, outside resources, structural protection. Well, BC, for one, I go to the last one, they don't do structural protection. So if I got a ranch or a house, I'm going to stay there because they're not going to be there for you. We had structural protection. I never, not bragging, but we didn't, in my 8 years, we never lost one structure, and we had some big cities like Thunder Bay that were under threat by fires. Not one. It's because our structural protection people are really good, and you can actually, and these guys know, you did it. The guys that stayed behind, poor guys didn't have the right equipment, but if they had the right equipment, they would have been able to protect a lot of those buildings probably. Because we were able to do it. And structural protection is something they will say they don't do. Because the BC is like the U.S. Forest Service, they don't do it either. That's just kind of they like each other and they do the same thing a lot. You'll notice that. So the other thing is they do backfires. I did backfires. I did lots of them in this province. I did prescribed fires. But that was in the days when you actually had a wet and dry forest. You don't have wet forests anymore. You don't have any anchors anymore. And you got to do a lot more planning for a prescribed fire. You really do have to fly around in a helicopter and have a good look at what's going on. You've got to have a professional in there, an ecologist or a forester in there. That's what we had, because all our people were connected. We had the fire guys and then our professionals. When it was fire season, bad fire season, they were in fighting fires, but they were doing the ones doing the helicopter flying and checking out where the fires were going to go. They used computer models, but it wasn't what they really used. It was guys flying around. That's what the experienced people flying around. They knew what the hell was going on. But we didn't do backfires in Ontario. Because if you start backfiring jack pine, you're just gonna create a big fire. Here it probably worked at one time, but I really question it right now. And my friend from Saskatchewan I talked to the other day, he said, they put so much resources on backfire, there's nothing left. There is a lot of resources to put on backfire, so if it's gonna be useful, and you're putting all those resources, I guess that's okay, but if it's not gonna be useful, and you're not doing it right, it's a waste of resources that they're probably taken from initial attack. So the whole thing is, you've got this model, everyone's costed out, everything has targets, but if you really don't have the model, then you don't really know what the hell you're doing. So the question is, do they have a model, or do they not? That's the question I would ask. I don't think they do. So the other thing that's important, evacuation, community involvement, outside help would be military, I guess. You know, they bring in choppers, that's the other part of it. We did that as well. But there's nothing wrong if the local resources are exhausted, the professional resources all exhausted, to bring in trained firefighters, like from Ontario or Quebec and stuff, but not from Brazil. That is wrong. That is just wrong. I don't totally agree with a couple of comments that we should keep it out of the province help. Occasionally, it's a good idea to bring it in, but you usually end up bringing, in my experience, people that you know. They would bring in people that have fought in BC before, and we would bring BC firefighters that have fought in Ontario before. And all I'm saying is the line fighters aren't the problem. It's the organization's the problem, and the way they've got it organized is the problem. And that's the big issue, I think. Okay, so the other thing almost finally, is my question is, after 2.8 million hectares burnt this year, and my question to my colleagues across the province, other provinces, they ask this question to me: how come you don't have a professional peer review of what happened this year? Why not? So what's going to happen is they have to completely review their business model, even if they haven't one. They better create one. They have to, and the BC Forest Service, Wildfire Service should not be part of it except to help them. It should be the best in the country, not United States, not CAL FIRE. Okay, that's what's got to happen. And that's part of the business model. You should do that every year. And then, also, you should have your client groups review how you did. Like you guys. How did you do? You know? And do you have any comments? I've already heard tons of comments here. But the biggest problem is you have no real input. You have no real input into this program at all. It's like the CIA. It's closed. It really is. And you're not getting input right now. That's a huge problem. So Premier has got an answer to you guys. Okay, so look, I mean, maybe there's somebody on this committee. They're probably really good people. They really are. That's not how you do a review of a fire program, folks. Its mandate is basically wishy-washy mandate. It's not a professional review of the fire program, costing, targets, and everything else. It's just not. And I think we've had other ones before in the past that have filled in and actually had some good comments. And what was the other? McDonald, is that?
Chapman,
Yeah.
Abbott.
Yeah, I read some of them. They're okay, but most of the time they ignore them. But you should have, as a part of your business program, a professional review every year, reviewed by your client groups. And the big problem is they didn't even, I don't believe they even include industry in this Premier's task force, and I think I talked about it in the next slide. Could be wrong. Oh yeah, I did say the advantage, I had two of them. Does start some dialogue, maybe, affected by wildfires, but really little. Shows the Premier knows the province has a problem, but and he said that he's going to put billions in it. I don't know. Is he just going to put billions into the slush fund for emergency management because the fires are going to get out of hand, or is he actually going to try to fix the problem? That's what's going to happen. You've got to fix the problem. And if they're not going to listen to people, they need to get outside help because they're not fixing the problem. We've seen this for years now, right? I'm speaking as a BC person right now. So challenges, as I said, no industry involvement. is not a professional peer review of the fire program by outside experts. The review is not independent as members of the BCWS and government are put out part of the team. Turf protection, that's bullshit. You should never do that. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Does not critique issues such as aerial detection, initial attack, and backburning, which are some of the main issues. Doesn't even talk about that. We have had reports in the past, and likely will result in nothing substantive. I'm sad to say. So what's needed now, and I'm almost done, guys. It's been a long day for you. An independent professional peer review, as I've said 4 times already, but it needs to be said 5 more times. Using outside experts and reporting to the Premier, not to the British Columbia Wildfire Service, to the Premier. I think the Premier, I'm not an NDP or I don't belong to any party. I never do belong to parties. I think he's a reasonable guy, and I think he's just being fed the wrong kind of information. Well, look, I'm going to tell you this right. I know, forget the politics. The only guy right now that's going to change this system is him being convinced it's screwed up. Honestly, people, I know, here's the Wizard of Oz telling you that you have to realize there's only one guy that can change this. That's him. So somehow we got to get in there and talk to him. And I won't charge anything for that. I've done it because I've done it before. Well, yeah, but you're not going. That's not going to solve the problem in the short term or long term. Sure, vote them out. But you know, to be fair, guys, let's not get politics here. None of the other damn parties done anything either. They screwed up too. They're screwed. Okay, where was I? Okay, I'm getting people upset. That's good. Okay, so commitment now from the BC Wildfire Service that fires right now. We want this now. That within 30 kilometers, the communities will be action within 2 hours. I really want 1 hour, but I'll live with 2 of detection by both tankers and initial attack crews. We've got to have that immediately. You have to. You need that commitment because they're not going to change things really quickly here, unfortunately. The budget went in last August, so whatever the hell's going on was determined last August. That's how budgets work. So just keep that in mind. But we can get a commitment that they're going to have people stationed, ready to fight the fires in your communities, waiting for the fires to start. Now, right? Starting now. That's where the money should be. Immediate collaboration with local contractors, industry, and communities, the resource fire management. BCWS cannot do this by themselves. I emphasize that 100 times. They just can't. You guys know they can't. And they really are just kids, a lot of them from university. We had experienced people that were in the business for 30 years on crews, except for my daughter, and she was with us. And by the way, she never got the job because she was my daughter. Nobody knew she was my daughter. She got it out honestly. But the point is, most of our crews were experienced, and they were based in communities. So there was some kids, but they only put 1 or 2 kids here and there with experienced crews. But these seem to be all kids. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Reinstitute the dawn to dusk firefighting regime instead of the 10 to 6 timing now. That's got to happen. So this is a Spanish 415. They got all kinds of them in Europe. And they're being built now. The 515s are built in Victoria and Calgary, for God's sakes. And guess where the first 20 are going? Guess.
Spain. Europe.
Europe, that's good. Yeah. You knew that. I told you that.
Cheating.
Okay, last one. So this is initial attack. This is one of the Saskatchewan planes that were offered to us this year. There it is. In Saskatchewan. That's it.